Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. I recently read an article that moved me because it's been such an important part of my life, the subject matter of the article, and that was hope. Hope got me through a lot of tough times while incarcerated and even since then. So I decided to have the article's author on. She is a psychotherapist who specializes in psychosis, mood disorders, and young adult mental health. She's also the author of the Psychosis and Mental Health Recovery Workbook, Activities for Young Adults from ACT, DBT, and Recovery-Oriented CBT. Jennifer Gerlach, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Before we get into the subject matter of hope, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your own struggles with mental health.
Sure. So before I went into the mental health field myself, working, I was a teenager. I went through some stuff. Um, I found that my own aspirations about life dipped quite a bit after my first hospitalization, being given some diagnoses. It was a slow climb back up to thinking, yes, you can do things, Jen. Yes, if you want to go to college, you can do that. And when I got there, I wanted to give a message to other young adults and teenagers that if you have something significant happen in your life, like a mental health diagnosis, that doesn't have to be the end. That you can still have aspirations and move forward toward things.
And you were actually told that you would have to spend your life on disability, right? That was their
Yeah,
prognosis for you.
I was encouraged to apply for disability. I got to an age where a lot of people my age were going on college tours and things like that, and that was sort of talked to me about as well. But disability was certainly discussed. Uh, I was in a therapeutic school full time when I graduated high school, and so I think that my own aspirations, my own thoughts of what I could do were a little bit different than the adults in my life. And fortunately, my own aspirations turned out to be a little more close to the truth. What I believed I could do. But it was quite scary, thinking, up to a certain age, having all these ideas, having all this support, and then you hit a wall, and it's this diagnosis is such a big part of your life then.
Thank you. To go, as the audience can see, I'm babysitting for my girlfriend's 4-year-old. He's a bit of a ham for the camera, so he may keep popping in, although I'm trying to get him not to. So you went from being having mental health issues to being told that you would have to be on disability to being a psychotherapist. What led you to being a psychotherapist, and when did you decide that that was the right road for you?
Yeah, so I was kind of lucky, going to therapeutic school. I did get to skip a grade, so I finished high school at age 17, and I just went to college. And after college, I went to grad school, and then after grad school, I got my license. And the whole time I sought out people who were supportive, people in the mental health recovery movement. I found a really good therapist in college who was supportive of me as well. And I just kept going at it.
Do you find that your own struggles help you when counseling others?
Absolutely. I think that when you've experienced something yourself, it puts you in a much better way to understand what it might be like. You don't know the person's exact experience because everybody's experience is a little different. But when you've been through something like a mental health challenge that may not be common, or like a hospitalization, that gives you a space to know, okay, like I know what it's like to not be able to leave this place, or I know what it's like to feel so down that you're not sure you want to get up the next morning. And that's really been helpful to me.
So when you use the word hope, what do you mean? What does hope mean to you?
Yeah. So I think of hope as any belief that there can be a better future. And that can be a long-term hope, like finishing school, or somebody doesn't have their children in their life currently reconnected with their kids. But it can also be a short-term hope, like being able to go outside and enjoy the multicolor of the leaf, or having a good conversation with somebody later in the day. But anything that keeps you going or kind of holds you on.
Would you say that hope is beyond just a desire and includes an element of expectations? In other words, like I might want to be a multimillionaire
Mhm.
and that would be a desire, but if I don't have any expectation that I could possibly achieve it, that wouldn't really be hope, right? Hope has to have a sense that what you're hoping for can actually happen.
Yeah, I think hope is ideally realistic, and shouldn't hinge on just expectations that are held too closely. So, for example, if I had one hope and find out that's not realistic, I'm I'm in a precarious place, right? Because then I can lose all hope. Versus if I have a value that I'm moving toward and hopes related to that value, then I'm in a little bit better place. So, for example, if you had a dream of becoming a multimillionaire, and the reason you wanted to become a multimillionaire is because you value being able to do what you want, you value self determination. Okay, that's fine to have that. Even if you think that that's not realistic, that's fine to have that as a dream. But you might move toward other ways of freedom each day, and that's hope, even if you never accomplish that dream.
What are the consequences for people who live without hope?
Yeah. I have met people who've lost hope, and it can be a really scary thing. Once we lose hope, some people withdraw and sort of let go and they stop trying. Other people will do things that they never would have done otherwise. Um, Unfortunately, hopelessness is one of the best predictors of suicide. Somebody thinks that there's no meaning, there's no reason, there's no hope left. And that's difficult.
It's interesting to me that you mentioned suicide because my mother committed suicide, and in looking at her situation, my mother was a drug addict. She was a heroin addict, and she had been clean off of heroin for several years, and she was on the methadone program. And after a while, she ended up getting thrown off the methadone program because she had prescription antidepressants that she wasn't supposed to have. And once
Mm,
she got thrown off the methadone clinic and she tried to get on another methadone clinic and they wouldn't take her. And then she tried to get a prescription for Suboxone and she couldn't get it. And her life was just like, I think she foresaw going back to having to steal to support a habit, maybe living on the streets, not having money. And that's what it was. It was just hopelessness. And I think that's ultimately what led her to commit suicide. Is that a typical example of what you're talking about?
wow, what an experience for your mother. I think that can be, when so many things are pushed away or so many doors are closed and a person's not able to see things getting better, not able to see a light, that can certainly lead to a very dark place.
So, had my mother had some hope, or people that do have hope, how does it help with psychological disturbances? Like, say you have somebody that has bipolar disorder or major depressive disorder. How can hope help to overcome that?
Yeah, so I think hope is really positively linked with health behaviors of any kind. And when you're living with something like major depression or bipolar disorder, it takes a lot to recover. It's not just medication for most people, and it's not even just therapy and medication for most people. It's a lot of work. And so a belief that there can be a day that I'm not going to feel this way anymore, or if a person's relationships have been impacted by the condition, belief that there could be a day that my relationships improve, or there could be even today that I have a conversation that's a positive sort of thing for me, or still holding on to certain values in life. That's extremely important for recovery.
From the day that I set forth in the prison system, I was 21 years old and I was sentenced to 33 years in prison. And this isn't unique to me, but for a lot of guys, it's the hope of one day being free that kind of gets one through and prevents from falling into just a deep, deep depression. Because if if you just think my life is over and I'm going to be stuck in this forever, it can become overwhelming, and a person can become downright despondent. So
Mm.
in that regard, hope has been such an important part of my life because I just always held on to the idea that I'm going to get out of prison. I'm going to have a life for myself. And interestingly, I've been out of prison less than a year. I have a podcast now. And have a girlfriend that I'm in love with. I'm babysitting her son, even though he's not listening to me right now, but he's still an absolutely beautiful little boy. And life is good. And I would have never been able to have reached this point where life is good had I not held on to hope. Have you seen a lot of instances like that in your experience as a therapist?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen people achieve all kind of dreams, reconnect with people they thought they weren't going to reconnect with. Um, and yeah, it's the person's hope, and there's also their willingness to keep moving toward that value that makes the difference. It's really remarkable to me how resilient people can be, and how people can grow even after something that can threaten their sense of hope. Or once somebody's lost hope and they've found it again, that's especially powerful too, because once you've lost it and you got it again, it's especially precious.
You mentioned the word resilient. And a lot of people have said to me, because I spent 25 years in prison, and a lot of people say, I don't know how you did it. I couldn't do it. And I tell them, you'd be surprised what you can do, because human beings in general are far more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. The day that I was headed to prison, and I knew it was going to be for a long time, I didn't know how long, but I knew it was going to be considerable. And I said to my mother, she was in the passenger seat, I said, I can't take this. I just can't take it. And my mother said to me, honey, you could take anything. And at the time, I thought she was wrong. But in retrospect, she was right. I could take it. And I've been able to take far more in life than I ever would have thought I could take. And that's due to this resilience. And I guess that it's just, for the most part of the human condition, that we're capable of so much more. And that's why hope is a realistic thing. It's not like you're Pollyanna in thinking that, oh, I want this, or I think I can get this. It's the fact, like you said, everybody was against you when they thought you couldn't make it, you couldn't do the things, you couldn't reach your aspirations, but you held on to hope and you were able to do it. But for those who are kind of despondent or without hope, or even for those that have hope but want to increase it, what are some strategies that can be employed to gain hope or to increase hope?
Yeah. So I think seeking out supportive people, if there are people in your life who you can enjoy time with, or who do want to hear about your values or your aspirations, I think that's very meaningful, having those connections. Um, writing down long-term goals and dreams, but not getting so attached. So I think it's good to keep sight of those dreams. But if we look at something that's going to take many, many years to accomplish as our only hope, that could be quite a bit more challenging than having something, okay, today I can move toward that value, that reason that I even want to achieve that dream today by doing the small step. I think that can help. And then also knowing that even if something happens where that long-term dream gets cut off, say that you want to reconnect with a loved one, and that loved one dies, and you know that banning certain spiritual practices, it may not be realistic to repair that relationship. You can still find other things to move forward to, or maybe why did you want to reconnect with that person? How can you celebrate their life now? But having hope be a flexible thing rather than fixed, I think that can really be helpful. I think you might be on mute, sir.
Sorry.
Okay.
See, I had to put her on mute because you won't calm down. Good boy. So I used to do, you mentioned thought reports. I used to do thought reports on a daily basis. And I did them based on the CBT model with the thought distortions, magnification, minimization, overgeneralization. And what I realized about a year into it, I looked back over my thought reports, and most of the stuff that I worried about never transpired. I was blowing stuff so out of proportion that it was causing me so much undue stress. But by writing it down and being able to look over it later, I was able to really see just how distorted my thinking was. And the one thing in my life that I never thought I'd be able to get over, from a kid, I always had a fear that my mother would die. My mother overdosed when I was a kid a few times, and I always had this fear that she would die. And I thought, I will never be able to take it if my mother died. But I realized when she did that I did take it. I could take it. I could move on with my life. The world didn't come to an end. And so I guess it's just more evidence for me that hope is consistent with reality, with the nature of things. The world in general, at least for those of us in developed countries, the world is a pretty good place, and it warrants hope. And now that doesn't mean bad things don't happen. It doesn't mean, I can't go outside today and get hit by a car and end up paralyzed. Plenty of bad things happen to plenty of people. But I think in general, in most instances, hope is justified by the way things are. Would you say that that's true? Is hope realistic?
Yeah, yeah. I think that hope is realistic, honestly, for anybody. Because if you look across cultures, the things that tend to be valued most are relational. And in most every culture, that's something people can access is relationships, either with self, others, connection, kindness, small things. And I think regardless of your circumstance, that can be hoped for, even if you are in a space of significant isolation, having a hope that someday that can end, that you can reconnect with others, or, making meaning of other aspects of meaning like creativity or curiosity. I think that's pretty ubiquitous, so we can all access that. And yes, of course, hope doesn't mean that life is not traumatic or that people are not going to experience awful things. Unfortunately, I walk around Target sometimes on my breaks or whatever, and I see people. I can just imagine. I wonder how many people in the store have lost somebody in the last year. How many of the people in the store are living with cancer or another serious illness? Like how many people here have been in a war zone, because we do live near a military base. And when I go through all of that list, it's like there's probably no one that hasn't been touched by anything. It's very ubiquitous, but trauma doesn't mean that hope is lost or has to be lost.
What are some strategies that people can use? Like, what can people do to build hope?
Sure. So I think it's really helpful to clarify your values. And if you don't know what your values are, that's okay. A lot of us don't take time to think about that explicitly. It's not, in school, it would be nice if they dedicated some of that time that they spend teaching you how to play the recorder and to do algebra to like just even think about like why anything matters to begin with. But clarifying what's important to you, I think that's a really good place to start. And then what steps you can take toward that every day. So, for example, if something important to me is kindness, one small step I could take might be giving somebody a smile, writing a letter of appreciation to somebody, um, doing something that I hope will make somebody else smile. Little bitty steps toward that value that gives you hope.
It just occurred to me. I think I already asked that question, but that's okay. It warranted repeating because I think people
Sure.
can use as many strategies as they can possibly have. And I think it's important, like you said, to remember the good things in life and to, you know, look at what we have. Like when I look at this little guy who won't be quiet for me, it just shows me that the future's bright. Hope is warranted. I've got so much to live for. I mean, he's such a joy. like I never in all my time in prison thought that I would be favored to have, you know, such a kid in my life that would really just make me feel good. And but it does, it happens. And so I think that's great, is just to hold on and keep in mind the good things that we do have, and the good things that we want to have. So what role has hope, and what role does hope continue to play in your life? Going back to your struggles as a teenager and right
Yeah.
on to today, what role has hope played and continued to play?
Yeah. So that is something that I do think that I was lucky in that, I was a kid that spent a lot of time thinking about what mattered to me. I wouldn't say everybody was against me. There were certainly people in my life who were encouraging. I had a neighbor who was very encouraging. I had an uncle who was very encouraging. Um, at times my mom could be encouraging as well. But clarifying those things that were important to me, knowing that I could take small steps, seeing those steps come together. Today, I spend a lot of time, before a conversation, I'll think about what my intentions are for that conversation. Or, I see people in a lot of pain. I'm a therapist, right? Like I get to see people who share with me sacred things that are extremely painful for them. And they leave here, and I will, just take a moment, a few seconds, just sending well wishes to them in my mind of like, well, I hope that they're find health and happiness. And, sometimes there's customized based on a person's situation. Um, I think those are some of the big things, and then just trying to be in the moment. I think that worries have a way of time traveling us, to these alternate universes where everything's horrible. And we could spend a lot of time there if we allow ourselves to. And sometimes it's really hard not to worry. But the reality is that each day, all you really have to worry about is today. You can have goals and you can have plans and you can set aside sometimes part of the day to work on those. But, in any given moment, most of the time, all that we have to worry about is that. And so that really helps me as well, of looking for the small, meaningful things, that I can experience or, even have today, even if tomorrow isn't promised, that today can be meaningful.
I find you to be an absolute inspiration. I love stories of people who have overcome struggles and just continue to strive and thrive. And from all appearances, that's what you do. And I think it's wonderful. So what currently are you doing? I mean, I know you write for, some for a blog, I think for Psychology Today.
Yeah.
Very good articles. Well, what else do you do?
Yeah. So I'm a psychotherapist, I have a private practice, true story counseling down here in Southern Illinois. Um, I finished a book earlier this year, a workbook for young adults living with mental health challenges, including psychosis. I have a partner who's just a wonderful person, who's also a very introverted person and would not want me to talk very much about him, but we'll just leave it at he's a wonderful person. Relationships are important to me. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so where can people find you? Besides, I mean, I know I said Psychology Today, but do you have a website or something where the audience can go to read what you've written, or where can they find your book?
Yeah, yeah. So the book's on Amazon. That's probably the easiest way to get it. There's other ways to get it, like Barnes and Noble website or Target website. As far as getting a hold of me, True Story Counseling. So TrueStory and counseling COUNSELING.com. That's my website. Welcome to fill out the form. I always reply to those. Or send an email or give me a call. I welcome communication.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I really appreciate it, and
Yeah, thank you for
hopefully you've given some people some hope. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Vincenzo. Say goodbye to the audience. Say bye, audience. Good boy.
Thank
Good
you. Thank you for
boy.
having me on here. And it
Thank
was
you
really
so much.
fantastic hearing your story as well. And
Thank
I
you.
wish well for you as well.
Thank you. For now, this is the Rational Egoist. I'm Michael Liebowitz signing out. Till next time.